Okay, I think we're going to get started, everybody. Hello, everyone. I'm Nellie Szilagyi-Benedek, Deputy Director for Education and Programs here at the Jewish Museum. In the aftermath of October 7th, 2023, and all that followed, the Jewish Museum introduced a new series of talks featuring James S. Snyder, Helen Goldsmith Menschel Director, in conversations with artists, authors, and other cultural leaders and thinkers, exploring the role and relevance of art and culture during these challenging times. Given the profoundly complex and sobering moment we are all experiencing today, these talks offer a forum for dialogue and discourse for public audiences of diverse backgrounds and perspectives, all of whom nonetheless embrace the Jewish Museum setting as a venue for education and engagement. Our next talk will take place on Monday, December 16th, and will feature Rabbi Elliot Cosgrove of Park Avenue Synagogue and James Snyder speaking about the history and mythology of the land of Israel, inspired by a special display at the Jewish Museum of the Tel Dan Stele, the oldest known archaeological evidence of the existence of the House of David, which is on loan from the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. The stele will be on view from December 5th, 2024 through January 5th, 2025. The director's talks are part of the Morris W. Offit Lecture Series made possible by the Jack, Joseph, and Morton Mandel Foundation, and we are extremely grateful for the support. Today, our guest is Ruth Patir, the artist representing Israel in this year's Venice Biennale. Ruth Patir will discuss her experience preparing for and then postponing the opening of her site-specific installation for the Israel Pavilion, along with more broadly the larger context of her artistic practice, which merges computer-generated imagery with documentary formats that provide new pathways for interpreting reality in today's socially and politically complicated environment. Ruth Patir's works often begin with the artist's autobiography and gradually open up to address larger societal issues, such as the politics of gender, technology, and the hidden mechanisms of power. Patir received her BFA from the Bezalel Academy of Art and Design in Jerusalem and her MFA in New Genres from Columbia University. Her recent solo exhibition titled My Father in the Cloud was presented at the Center for Contemporary Art in Tel Aviv. Her film Sleepers, before winning the Video and Experimental Cinema and Video Art Award at the Jerusalem Film Festival, was shown at Dance Space Project in New York. Patir's work has been exhibited in New York at the Museum of Modern Art, the Anthology Film Archive, and the Flux Factory, as well as the Petach Tikva Museum of Art in Israel. Her work is in the collections of the Centre Pompidou, the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, and the Tel Aviv Museum of Art, among others. We are all looking forward to the conversation tonight and appreciate your being here with us. I would like to remind everyone to please turn off your cell phones and refrain from recording or photographing during tonight's program. And now, join me in welcoming our speakers, James Snyder and Ruth Patir.
Good evening. You know, this is amazing. We are a packed house. Don't tell anyone, we're over capacity. There are 221 of you sitting here. And when we set this date, quietly, I was told on the side, you know, we are in Hayamim Hanoraim, you know, we're in the days of awe, we're between the holidays. No one is going to come. And you're all here, and it means a lot to us. Nellie, who is fantastic, we do have to applaud Nellie. Nellie is unbelievable. She really is unbelievable in the way that she and her crew organize educational programming all year round. Some of you have heard me give you this number, over 30,000 kids and adults register in programs that Nellie and her gang produce, and it's really pretty extraordinary for a museum of this scale. So, Nellie, we do thank you. You know, Nellie has already said this is a very challenging time. I'm sure this week has weighed on all of you the way that it continues to weigh on me. It's like the conflation of the Days of Awe and the first anniversary of October 7. You know, I think about this a lot. It's like the categorical definition of the term sublime being the point of collision between awe and terror. This is exactly what this week is about, and that's another talk. You'll come back when we figure out how to do that one. Again, Nellie has already said this is the first in this year's series of our director's talks. Many of you know we started this series last year. It was part of our action plan following the tragedy of October 7 and all of the events that unfolded afterward, and that, alas, are still unfolding today. We felt then, and we continue to feel now, that it's very important for us to message calling for the restoration of humanism and identifying and highlighting the fundamental role of museums as custodians of the legacy of global cultural heritage. Museums, especially this museum, need to be platforms for education and engagement and models for activism through culture, activism through cultural diplomacy as a pathway to a brighter time, and as an antidote to the ignorance and political polarization that we all continue to see and that continues to grow all around us. The centrality of our action plan really focuses on these directors' talks, which are meant to be ways to look at the complexity of these times through a cultural lens, talking with artists, writers, creative makers of all kinds. Many of you kindly came last year when we talked to the writer Ruby Namdar and to two artists, Michal Rovner, but before that, Zoya Cherkassky. And you all know who Zoya is, and I have to say it's an incredible privilege that she's here with us this evening, and I'm going to make her stand up. Zoya, thank you for getting here. It means a lot to us. Tonight, it's a very special opportunity. It's actually an honor to host Ruth Patir, the Israeli artist for the Israel Pavilion at this year's Venice Biennale. 2 weeks ago, it was a privilege for Darcy Alexander, our chief curator, and me to return to the Biennale, having been there during the week of its opening with a group of Jewish museum friends, to take a deep dive into what worked and what did not work at this year's Biennale. It was an opportunity then for us to be together with Ruth at the Israel Pavilion, outside of the pavilion, not inside, and we'll talk about that, to explore her experience in creating the Israel Pavilion this year. We had an intimate conversation with her afterward, which was very moving, and which only added more stimulus and excitement to the conversation that we're going to have now. A lot of you know me, and you know that for me, the guiding principles of my life include the notions that all things connect and that serendipity serves us in a very enriching way. And I mention that because it has a little bit to do with how Ruth and I met one another. My appointment as director of the Jewish Museum was announced August last year, August 14. And on August 15, I was invited to go to Brooklyn to visit Ruth Patir, who was doing a residency here sponsored by Artis. This is before she was appointed to do this year's Biennale. That happened on September 7. And what was even more remarkable about that is that she did this project together with Mira Lapidot, whom I had the privilege to mentor in her capacity as chief curator at the Israel Museum, and who is now the chief curator of the Tel Aviv Museum. That happened on September 7th, and it was very exciting to hear. Ruth then returned on October 4th, and we were at a dinner together where she actually presented her kind of work in progress on Motherland, a project that she'd started 3 years earlier. This was October 4. 3 days later was October 7. The world changed for all of us. Strangely, it changed for Ruth because she couldn't go home to Israel that day. It changed for Tina and me because we were about to leave for Israel then as well. And I want to fast forward from that moment to January of this year, when you may recall there was a call to cancel the Israel Pavilion for this year. The Italian Ministry of Culture did the right thing and said, nothing doing, the pavilion will happen. And Ruth resolved to move ahead. I was privileged to be part of the team that advised her then, and I said to her simply, Ruth said, what do we do? What do we do? And I said, you know, just make the best pavilion you possibly can. And that's what she did. And during the opening week of the Biennale in April, it was a privilege for Tina and me to see the pavilion the day before its official opening was to take place. Then, of course, as you all know, Ruth and Mira, her curator, made the decision not to open. They made the decision to say that they were ready and they would be pleased to welcome visitors once there was peace and once hostages were released. Who then knew how long it would take for those two moments to occur, and they have not yet happened. So in a funny way, tonight, are you all sitting down? You think about this. Tonight, you are going to experience the premiere of Motherland. And we have lots of questions after that, but before we do that, I really want Ruth to take us through the pavilion, to take us through Motherland, and to give you an experience that we know one day, before too long, you'll be able to see in 3D live. But tonight, you're going to have an experience that really almost no one has had as yet. And Ruth, it's just an amazing privilege for us to have the opportunity to do this with you now.
What a beautiful introduction. And an overwhelmingly huge crowd. And I'm not nervous at all.
She's not kidding.
So, when I got the nomination for the pavilion, and I guess until now, I was relatively a very unknown artist in the international art world. So I'll take you a second back to 2018, when I, oh, shit, of course. When I made my homecoming film, Love Letters to Ruth. It was just after I graduated my master's and I went back to Israel, and I decided that I want to make a complicated movie that's feminine and overly emotional, in which I enact the love story of Moshe Dayan and myself as Ruth, named like his late wife, Ruth Dayan. I had all of my sort of famous ex-boyfriends read the love letters that Moshe Dayan wrote to his wife, Ruth, to me, and they were enacted by an avatar wearing dresses and acting kind of foolish in a 3D animation doc. Through that film, I learned about the emotional and complicated relationship that masculinity, nationalism have with archaeology in the Jewish diaspora, Israel, and of course in the state of Israel, and its and its power. As you may know, Moshe Dayan, the late General Moshe Dayan, was, aside from his love of collecting lovers outside of his marriage, he also really loved to collect fetish objects in the shape of archaeology, particularly biblical archaeology. Now, Dayan would imagine himself walking in the streets of Chatzor with the people of the biblical times. And I was thinking about it and saying how nice it is to be a Moshe Dayan and imagine yourself in 500 BC. How not nice it would be if I was there at 500 BC. And quintessentially, of course, Dayan had a lot of female figurines in his collection, as well as in real life. And the stories of these figurines is often told as sort of a proof of the historical land. And I was thinking that for me, maybe they're this Trojan horse, right? Maybe they are, because these figurines who are in the Jewish Museum collection as well are found in the thousands, that maybe if I just talk to them, I could realize a story that's not been told. Maybe they are a relic of a matriarchal practice. Maybe by taking them and bringing them into the now, I could sort of find out something. And now, any Israeli woman, young-ish, will tell you that when you go to Israel, you are immediately confronted by your fertility. When I was living in New York, I would go back home, and immediately anyone I met in the bus, in the grocery store, obviously all the doctors would ask me, if I'm a mother, when am I going to have babies, and what's up with that? And I realized that I was holding in my hands these fertility idols that I was obsessing about, and basically we have this mutual history that we share. But after working them for a while by digitally scanning them from museum collections, in 2020, March, exactly when COVID started, I found myself in public fertility clinics. And suddenly, I was sort of profoundly amazed by my womanhood, sitting with all of these women in the waiting room. And so in the next few slides, I'm going to show you sort of snippets from works that are inside the pavilion at the moment. And the first one is called Petach Tikva because it is located in a hospital in Petach Tikva, and also because Petach Tikva in Hebrew means the opening of hope, which is sort of cynical. And in it, you will see these figurines, which are dated from between 800 and 500 BC, awaiting to see the doctor at the clinic. So actually what you're watching is not a film, it's a code-based work. And every time a figurine, like we do, look at our phones or looks at the screen and watches TV, what you're actually seeing is a live feed of the news. So ideally, in the pavilion, a guest would go in, and whenever he'd see a screen in the TV, he'd see the actual news of that time. So when I was walking inside of the pavilion, when the Jewish Museum Board were gracious enough to invite me, is where I also learned, for instance, about the Nasrallah's death inside the film of Petach Tikva, inside the Israeli pavilion on my own. And what you're seeing right now is actually footage from the video from yesterday.
Can I just point out the timeliness? This is Hurricane Milton yesterday reaching Sarasota.
And I'll talk about it a little bit, but I'll just say that at least throughout the months of making this work, which was already pretty rushed, I had a really hard time figuring out how does reality fit in a moment where I don't know what reality is. And so one of the earliest ideas that I had was that I would bring reality in the most immediate way that I could, and I'll just bring the news inside the space. So whatever the news are, they'll just be there. And that feeling of being passively looking at your phone, reading the news would be at least part of the show as it is. But actually, the reason I started this project was that because in March 2020, I finally did the test and realized that I did inherit my father's BRCA gene. And for those of you who don't know, the BRCA gene is the gene that increases your chances for cancer in your reproductive organs. And now, in Israel, this test is free. And then if you are a BRCA carrier, then you are immediately ushered through the public health system in order to go fertility preservation treatments. Now, that moment I realized that my ovaries are, you know, an interest of the state. And as I was sort of dealing with the biopolitical relationship of my womb to my citizenship, I decided that, and also, you know, asking myself serious questions, I decided that I'll do what I do, which is I'll start making art about it. And so I would secretly go into these meetings and record all of the sessions I had with whomever. I'm recording this right now. So this is another video.
בסדר, נשאל אותך קצת שאלות.
בבקשה.
איזה קופת חולים את?
כללית.
מה מצבך המשפחתי?
מורכב.
בזוגיות לצורך העניין?
לא.
אין לך ילדים?
אין לי ילדים.
טרם.
כן.
ומאיזה מוצא הורייך?
אשכנזים.
באיזה גיל קיבלת וסת?
11.
וכל כמה זמן יש לך וסת?
חודש.
וכמה ימים הווסת?
3.
אין לך נטייה לסורי יתר, לאקנה?
לא.
ויטמינים את לוקחת?
לא.
את לא מעשנת?
מעשנת.
זה לא טוב.
אני יודעת.
סמים? פחות. לא משהו כבד.
כן.
היית בהיריון?
לא.
ניסית להיות בהיריון?
לא.
יש לך ילדים?
לא.
לא. היית בהיריון?
לא.
יש איזה מחלות כרוניות או גנטיות במשפחה שלך?
כן.
אז תספרי לי.
יש במשפחה סיפור בסרטן של השחלות, הראשונה אבא, אמא, אחים אחרים.
כן.
אוקיי, אצל מי?
אבא נפטר מסרטן.
אנחנו מדברים שד או שחלות?
אבא נפטר מסרטן שקשור לברכה 2.
סליחה שאני כותב, שד או שחלות?
אז דודה שלי, אחותו, היא יש לה שד ושחלות.
לדודה,
כן.
אוקיי. קרבה ראשונה אין לה. אוקיי.
אבא שלי ואחותו, שניהם נשאים של ברכה 2. דרך אבא הבנו שלדודה יש ברכה, ואז
עשית בדיקה
יש לי ברכה 2.
ויש לה ברכה 2. אוקיי.
יש עוד מחלות כאלה כרוניות או גנטיות במשפחה? לא.
תשמרי את האופציות של הפריון על ידי הקפאת עוברים, תעשי את הסרת השחלות והחצוצרות מוקדם ככל האפשר, אז זה מקטין מאוד את הסיכון.
אוקיי.
מהו עיסוקך?
אמנית.
איזה סוג של אומנות את עושה? זה כבר רכילות, זה לא קשור ל...
אני עושה הרבה דברים בתלת וסימולציות. מאוד כאלה בסוכות.
וידאו?
כן.
אוקיי.
So a little bit about the behind the scenes. In my work for the past years, I've been working with this technology called motion capture. And essentially, I have this suit, which you see in the picture. The suit has 16 sensors that record every slightest movement of my body. And so as I was already kind of going through this very sci-fi experiment of producing more eggs than any woman would produce on a normal month, I decided that I would wear the suit while my body is going through this transformation. And so whenever I would do my hormonal shots, I would wear the suit and record them. And so I'm going to show you sort of a little bit of how it works. So here you see me filming myself as the vlogger that I'm not. And the figurine from Lachish sort of going through the thing with me. And I guess since these are two very technological processes, right? Sort of the new technology of IVF and what it is, does it create in like late capitalism, and obviously all of this motion capture, 3D, computer-generated images. And so back to the pavilion. As James said, and even though this is sort of, now that I know that I saw you laughing and I've calmed down a bit, I know that this is a real honor to be here. And I'm very excited and to show you the work, but also I believe that the reality of how it happens that no one has seen it yet was right. So in the third floor is the masterwork, which is a 30-minute film which chronicles all of the procedures and includes conversation I had with nurses, with my mother, with my boyfriend at the time. And I'm gonna show you a little bit of it. Oh, I forgot to say that the third floor, which is the top floor of the Israeli Pavilion, which is kind of like a villa, is a one-to-one imitation of my apartment in Tel Aviv. And essentially, because I built my apartment for the films, I reproduced my apartment inside of the pavilion. And the idea was that the tired viewer walking around the Biennale could sit down on a couch and charge his phone and like maybe on the floor and be in a very cozy, very intimate environment for me to share something very intimate.
אני מודה לרות שאפשרה לי לעמוד כאן על הבמה ולהביא את הידיעה מבחינתי החד משמעית שריקוד בטן זה ריקוד של פוריות. אני מזמינה אתכם פשוט לעמוד וביחד אנחנו... אפשר להגביר את הסאונד? איפה האיש הטכני? ונותנת לאגן לעבור מצד בצד. אנחנו ניקח מתוך התנועה הזאת את האגן לתנועה של שמינייה. להביא את השמחה. אינטראקציה בנייה שמחה. גם תגיד את עצמי וגם לשכנות שלי, לשון השבט.
מספר 830. נא לגשת לחדר מספר 219.
אז בוא תתחיל לתאר מי, איזה מחלה ובאיזה גיל.
אוקיי. אבא שלי נפטר מסרטן ההורמוני. משהו כמו שנה וחצי ממותו, אני הצלחתי לעזור באמת לעשות את הבדיקה עם אחי ואחותי. אני ואחי נשאים, ואחותי.
יש לך ילדים?
לא.
וסת ראשונה מתי?
היי.
11. הורמונים אחרים כן יצא?
אני עשיתי הקפאה לפני חודשיים. סבב ראשון.
אוקיי. מאוד בעיה שתעשי גם את השני.
כן, אני אעשה שני ושלישי. יצא לי מעט.
זה רעיון מצוין, כי את תופתיעי לדעת מה שזה עושה לזוגיות.
מה זה אומר?
את בקטע של גברים?
כן.
לגברים יש חיישן שזה פשוט לעומת כמה רגיש. זאת אומרת, כשאת יושבת בדייט מול גבר, מאחורי את כל הזמן הזה.
נכון.
וזה עכשיו לא זה שסיפר את כל הסיפור הזה, נציג הסוד שלהם. פול.
Okay, so some background information. While I think all women, particularly right now, have this opportunity of sort of beating nature by these new technologies that allow, you know, a longer gap in your fertility window. The state of Israel has an interesting history with the topic, and it starts in a way with Prime Minister Ben-Gurion, who announced the birthing prize, which is 100 liras for a woman who bared more than 10 children. And sort of what started in that prize became nowadays sort of the, you know, the stipends for children that allow for families to grow into huge sizes with no income, and so forth and so forth. So the relationship of fertility is very political there, and the fact that while for BRCA carriers it's completely free, for non-BRCA carriers it's very much subsidized. So it is a very, very popular thing in Israel. And so I was going to say that it seems like the project is very funny, but it actually is sort of funny and not funny. And so the next scene that you're going to see is a cute and sad argument I had with my now ex-boyfriend. Oh, I would also say that it's the first time in the project where you see me and not the, you know, the avatar that's masking me. And that I would hope would represent women everywhere.
איך זה מרגיש השבוע? זה ההקפאה הכי ארוכה, לא?
כן, פשוט מרגיש ארוך.
נשמע מפריע לך, מה היית רוצה לעשות ואת לא עושה?
בא לי פשוט לעשות דברים ממש 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 כאילו אקסטרים והרסניים לגוף שלי, ואני כאילו לא מרשה לעצמי.
איך את משחקת?
Stand in pose. Relax to look straight ahead for 3 seconds. Processing. Now, stand still to apply and finalize the calibration. The calibration process is now complete. You can move freely now.
מה יש לי? מה יש? את מרגישה לי עצובה? מה, העלבת אותך?
קצת. או בעיקר, פשוט לא ההפך.
מה זה ההפך?
גרמתי להעלות ככה.
שבכלל סיכוי לגרום לך לאישה כזאת.
לא, מה, תחשוב כאילו, שכאילו אתה שואל את השאלה ואני עונה לך את התשובה ואתה אומר לי אני לא מאמין לך. זה לא מה שבאמת אכפת לך ממנו. את נראית כאילו שאת משחקת.
רציתי לצלם אותך, חשבתי שאת רוצה שאני אוציא את ה... What's behind the surface?
לא, מבחינתי כשאומרים לי כאילו, את נראית כאילו את עושה פרפורמנס, את די בא לי.
לא, אני מדליקים מצלמה, אני אעשה פרפורמנס. אני חושב שכמעט תמיד שאתה מבקש מאנשים להגיד בפעם הראשונה, זה דבר שקשה להם, הם לא יגידו אותו. קצת בירה?
כן, אני רוצה לעזור.
אז לא יודעת איתה. רוצה להגיד משהו לסיום?
אמן, אמן ואמן. בטעות, יקרה נס. ביום שישי אני אלך לבדיקה. So before I end this segment and give the stage back to James, I just wanted to say, first of all, that while this is my personal story, I worked with a lot of people on this project. And I will not thank all of them right now. But I will definitely mention Tamar Margalit, the co-curator with Mirela Pidot, who curated the pavilion. And since I have the fortune that I can thank my lead animator, who worked on the project with Three Sisters Studio and is here, and has been working for me for the past 6 years. It's kind of nice. So, Jonathan Wasserman. Now do the thing again. Who has been such a friend and, amazing. Thank you.
And you know it ain't over yet. So remember, I gave you the timetable. On October 4th, after we had met, and after Ruth had been appointed to do the Israel Pavilion, on October 4, before October 7, we had the opportunity here in New York at a dinner to see this work in progress. And it was amazing. To me, it was amazing. It was brilliant. I mean, I've known these fertility goddesses, these Iron Age fertility goddesses from the collection of the Israel Museum for a really long time. And you sort of understood that they had one meaning and that they were from one time in the Iron Age. But that really isn't true. They probably had many meanings, these fertility goddesses. And we just took a kind of obvious message from them. And they're from, 900 BC, 800 BC. But the truth of the matter is that what they're about begins at that moment, but the trajectory continues to modern time. So it's like these fertility goddesses from the Iron Age and the issues that they were dealing with then merge today with the issues that women grapple with all the time regarding reproduction rights, fertility issues. And the theme of the Biennale already identified, which in the end we all realized was flawed, foreigners everywhere. And this became about women everywhere and women at any time. And it was extraordinary. And we were all just waiting to see how it was going to unfold. 3 days later was October 7. And we were in touch, and we'll speak a little more later about that. But immediately, Ruth started working on one more component, a film called Keening, and she's going to show it in a moment. And in Keening, she relates not just to the goddesses, but to the broken fragments, of which there are hundreds, which are in the custody of the Israel Antiquities Authority, and some are at the Israel Museum. And looking at those broken fragments from antiquity, also about women confronting fertility issues from that moment until today. And the chapter you're going to see next sort of deals with that subject in a different way. And I want you to see it first, and then we're going to talk a bit about it, because did the issues change? Was the subject still about these issues of fertility and women's issues? Did the subject expand to be about the issues of the state of Israel? Was the subject universal in the way that it had been, or was it also becoming political in some respects? But before we talk about all that, I want you to see the piece.
So I'll just walk you a little bit again through it to say that I think, like everyone, and I don't think there's good metaphors, right? We always people try to say astonishing, horrifying, devastating. It all feels like sort of inadequate. I really didn't know what to do. But what I did know was that I was going to bring the figurines to Venice. And I knew that I was going to bring the figurines to Venice because I knew that they needed to be there with the work. And so I called the Antiquity Authority and asked them to have some figurines for the Venice show. And the archaeologists who were guarding that era said to me apologetically that they can only bring me very small amount of figurines that are whole. But they have thousands of pieces. And they invited me to go to see them. And it was really maybe a week after or 2 weeks after, and I was anyways not sleeping and feeling so many things. And I was looking at these drawers and drawers of heads and busts and these pieces of broken women, and noticing that every woman that I saw in the streets or on the news or everywhere, they were all describing themselves as just feeling devastatingly broken. And I had this like feeling of time sort of suddenly expanding into this very, very long thing, and how maybe it's just this cursed place where they constantly break women. And I went back to see this text, which is a Mesopotamian text, so it's 4,000 years old. It's way older than them. And it tells the story of a devastating massacre that happened in the city of Ur. And later it was translated actually for the scrolls of Eicha. And the woman there, she's broken. All these violent things happen to her, but then, you know, it is explained that the woman is an abstraction. She symbolizes the people, right? She symbolizes the land. And I started thinking a lot about keening, sort of this practice of lamentation, and reading a lot about it. And I learned something that I thought was really beautiful, which is that keening or lamentation comes from the Hebrew word kinah. And the Hebrew word kinah comes from the word ken, and ken is nest, like a bird nest. And the idea is that the women's role in society is to create a nest for the grief to sort of sit and dismantle. And I couldn't interpret anything or make any gesture or statement, but I knew I could sort of share my grief and anger. And so I made a new piece in which I took these fragments. Here you see them in the Antiquity Authority. And here you see them in the show where I asked the archaeologist, it was like, bring me every fragment I can have, as much as they allowed. And I made this new piece in sort of grief and protest. And maybe this is also to say that at that time, we were already, I particularly, but when I say I also mean me and everyone working on my team, we were protesting for like 2 years, every week. So again, it was bringing them into the now and asking whether the now has, if anything ever changes. And like I guess James said, but I think it's really important to say that when I see them, I think of like pre-monotheistic objects. And I know you find them in the Phoenician culture, in the Mesopotamian days. I know there are women of the area. And I want to think that there are women who share the area. And so this is keening.
So think for a moment about that shift, which brought these two pieces together and also tried, despite being before October 7 and after, to preserve what was meant to be the narrative of this project. And so Tina and I and Darcy were in Venice for the opening week. We were very excited about this project. Really, it should have won the Golden Lion. It's amazing because it does come from deep in the heart of Israel, but it is really about universal issues relating to women from antiquity to the present moment. And the night before, we were very excited. That afternoon, we'd been invited before the opening day to see the pavilion. It was stunning. And Mira and Ruth called me to say, listen, don't be angry with us, but we've made the decision not to open. And they explained, and they said that there would be the sign that says, we are here, we're ready to welcome you once there's peace and once hostages are released. And they said, are you angry with me? And I said, actually, no, not at all. I'm not angry. I'm actually proud because you've taken ownership here. What would have happened if you hadn't done so is that you would have been subject to the political agenda of those protesting against Israel, unrelated to what the Biennale was meant to be about. And I said, for us, for me, this was a definitional example of activism through art, which can be a productive kind of activism. And in our conversation, I said to Ruth, and I understood, I appreciated her point to me, which was that she had her narrative for the pavilion, the one that we keep talking about, this universal, this timeline of universal angst affecting women about reproduction rights and fertility. And that if she had opened, there would have been a different narrative. Protesters would have overtaken her narrative, and it would have become an anti-Israeli narrative. And the true narrative wouldn't have been preserved, it would have been lost. And, you know, this is what the pavilion looks like from the outside. So you look in and you see Keening, and you also see the text that describes the readiness, Ruth and Mira and Tamar's readiness to open once there's peace and hostages are released. And in the next image, you'll see people go and they're standing outside and they're looking in. Here they are being protected, but they're looking in. And my question for you, my one question for you is, what are these people thinking? Are they thinking that they're seeing your project and its universal theme, or is their thinking being tinted in any way by all the political issues that are surrounding all of us today?
So I think we both knew that this is the point where we maybe have some disagreements. So I would say that the decision, which we didn't take very lightly, was that we were always going to be earnest, and we were going to be honest about how we're feeling. And one of the things that we were really, yes, we were worried about sort of the work being co-opted by the discussion, okay? The discussion was quite loud, and it was hard to ignore the discussion. But we were also genuinely heartbroken and sad. And we felt that we were in a situation where opening the pavilion as is would be going in this narrative which we didn't feel like we were part of, like this, you know, together we win thing, which we're not. This is not what we're doing. And so we decided that we would pause. And by pausing, that we would share with the world that there are Israeli people who are broken and devastated, who want the war to end, and that grouping together everyone, every citizen with its current government is just wrong. and it's not okay, and we won't accept it. So to your question, I don't know what they're thinking. I know that some of them are thinking, oh, this, whatever. Curse word, pick one. Some of them, what I do know is that a lot of Israelis who feel that their voices have been lost in all of this chaos, feel that they're represented in our act, and I'm proud of that. And I also think that at least at the time, no one was really talking about the hostages. They sort of disappeared from the discussion. And even the fact that we could share the stage with the hostage family and share all this media frenzy with the people in the streets and our want for a ceasefire and our need for a hostage deal was huge for me. But I don't know that they see the universality or the depth and nuance of the work thus far.
And this is actually where your heroism comes into the picture. Everything you say is correct, and your true heroism was your decision not to open, and your decision to preserve your narrative. And of course, this is what activism through art, this is what cultural activism is about. You can't not resonate with what is happening in the world around you. And you did make your decision so as to preserve what your narrative wanted to be about. At the same time, you accepted that you weren't having the opportunity to show your full narrative in the setting of the Biennale. And honestly, the Israel Pavilion would have been a candidate for the Golden Lion, because it would have been, no, all of this would have been understood. And forget that it's coming from Israel. And at this moment, it would have been understood. And so, I don't know, the week of the opening, everyone leaves by Thursday. So we were still there. Tina and I and our kids stayed to do the Seder in Venice the following week. And on Friday in the quiet, we took Ruth to Harry's bar. And everybody was there, and we introduced her around as if she were the hero of the Biennale. And I think it was a great moment. Now, to come back to our Jewish Museum for a moment, our mandate here is to look at Jewish world culture across the global diaspora. And, look at Motherland. It takes us back to sources in the Holy Land, and yet it relates to global challenges today. It started with one set of challenges having to do with women's rights, and it became part of the narrative of all of the challenges around us today. For us in this museum, we felt immediately that this was a project that resonated with us in deep ways. And I'm actually really pleased to announce, I mentioned that there were 20 guests who came with us from the museum for our trip to Venice a few weeks ago. They were all so moved by the experience of being there and being with Ruth that together they've acquired Motherland for us in the museum, and we are the first museum to be buying this work. It's an edition of 5, and I'm sure it's going to sell out. Some of those 20 are here. Would you folks just stand up so everyone can cheer for you? Don't be shy. You just have to do that. And, we are in such a complex time in the world, and this acquisition adds to the trove of work that we are acquiring from Israel after October 7. You remember, many of you came to see Zoya Cherkassky's October 7 drawing series that we showed in December, barely 8 weeks after October 7. And as you recall, those drawings and one of the paintings being executed from the drawings have also been acquired for us. So we can be very proud at this moment. So this is going to be with us. And I've talked to Ruth, there was no sense back in April that the pavilion still would not yet be open today, and that is the case. And the Biennale closes next month, and I think the Tel Aviv Museum will be the first museum to show Motherland in its full installation next spring. And we're hoping that a bunch of you are going to come with us to be there, given our part in this picture, and we will plan subsequently to show it here as well. And it's just, it's something that's very moving for us. This is where this museum should be on the landscape of museums here in the US and all around the world, and we are grateful to be a part of this picture. Now, there's one more little segment that we're going to see before we wrap up. Ruth's closing message, it's kind of amazing. It's a message of hope. Some of you know me. You know I'm a pathological optimist. You've been listening to Ruth. You don't think she is, but guess what? Her work and this work is an agent for a pathway to a brighter future, and you've just got to see this closing segment, and then you've just got to stand up and cheer for Ruth, a true hero, a true hero, and she is. But first, watch this.
Okay, I will say though, one thing is that I still really hope that that sign that the pavilion will open, I still hope that this idea that we organize it around will and future tense is sort of also part of this.
Bizrat Hashem. Thank you all for being here for this premiere moment. Ruth, you are amazing. You are a hero, and it just is a privilege to be a part of this picture with you. So thank you, thank you.
I think you're very lucky to have James.